Well, first of all, thank you for being here despite the wonderful snow outside. You're the hardcore people, and we appreciate that. But it's absolutely terrific to have Dave Danielson here. And he and I go back now several years. And we're going to talk about the future of energy. First of all, before I go there, I just want to share that thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
I think the nation owes you a big thanks for what you've done. Just to give you a little background, Dave joined the Department of Energy as employee number 1 in RPE before I went there. And before that, he had a great job. He was in the venture capital industry, finished his PhD from MIT in material science, joined the venture capital industry, was doing very well. And someone made a phone call, and he showed up in his car. And he has been there, I think, the longest as a political appointee. And the first question to you is, what made you join RPE? What made you join the Department of Energy? Because in many ways, and I'll tell you this, you set the tone of what RPE is going to be. So tell us, so thank you for that, but tell us what made you do that.
Well, thanks, Arun. And I think many of you may know that Arun was the founding Senate-confirmed director of RPE. Many of you may have heard of DARPA, which is the defense version of this. It's about funding totally out there, high risk, high reward new technologies. At DARPA, they funded the stealth technology, the internet, and all kinds of other technologies. And so we created RPE with the vision of trying to do that for energy. I think we'll talk a little bit. We've heard a lot about it at the summit, but we've had kind of an exciting revolution in clean energy that's been very visible over the last 8 years by virtue of administration, private sector, and many others collaborating and getting great results. But I think what Arun is referring to is something that I might call a quiet revolution that happened within the administration over the last 7, 8 years. And Arun is right. I've been at the Department of Energy for almost 7 years. If you had told me that when I arrived, I would not have believed you. But if you look at it, there was a new kind of Secretary of Energy coming in with Steve Chu, a Nobel Prize winner, someone who really cared about technology and cared about the details. It was really raised the bar for the level of discourse and expectations in technology and innovation at the department. And that was obviously followed on with someone like Secretary Moniz with similar amazing credentials in the energy world. When you see those kind of leaders come into an agency, I think it changes the perception on the outside. A lot of folks might not think of the government as the first place to go if there's someone who really is looking to be ambitious and innovative and move fast and change the world. But I think when you see a leader like that, you say, you know what, I bet we can do it. Because if a leader like that is gonna make it happen, I'm willing to take a bet. And so I was willing to take that bet for sure. But what's been probably equally exciting is dozens and dozens of people with amazing backgrounds from the private sector, from the research sector, and from other sectors have been piling in to the department over the last 7 years, to the point now where it's pretty amazing level of talent you see. I can just name a couple. The person who runs our transportation research work is a guy named Ruben Sarkar. He worked on the GM Volt and was one of the leading executives of Proterra, which is an electric bus startup backed by one of the leading venture capital firms, Kleiner Perkins. Roland Risser runs our buildings effort, and he was really the head of energy efficiency at Pacific Gas and Electric. And so we're seeing people come in from ExxonMobil and all kinds of places, and we're seeing people go and lead GE Ecomagination or going to Google Nest. And so that's something I think the kind of leadership we've seen at the department has been a real revolution internally, and I think that's changed the talent level. And I think, as all of you know, the talent level changes everything. And so I think the level of innovation and the amount of impact that we're seeing out of the department, I think, has gone to a completely new level because it really starts at that kind of leadership.
So before we go to EERE, let's talk about RPE. And you were employee number 1. A lot of things happened. We had some great time out there. And RPE has gone through some ups and downs in terms of whether it'll survive or not. And it survived. It was a startup company. And you went from a venture capital to a startup company. Looking forward now, and I want you to think about, let's say, 2020 to 2025, 10 years from now, tell the people what the impact of RPE could be.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one way to think about the problem we have in front of us that really sets the stage is, I think we all know by 2050, we need to get down to about 80% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. And so any new technology, for it to scale to make an impact, it's got to about 20 years from when it's first commercialized. So by 2030, we better have things that are actually getting into the market, or they're not going to be making an impact by then. And so I'd say, if you haven't, between now and 2020, 2022, 2025, we need to plant a whole bunch of seeds of the disruptive technologies that are going to be needed to get us to those kind of goals. And there's a lot of debate about whether we have those technologies already or not. I think we have a number of them, but we don't have all of them. And we need RPE to really help us develop the next suite of technologies that will get us to 80% reductions. And so early on, when people ask you, is this a success yet or not? At the beginning, in the end, it's all about those greenhouse gas emissions. It's about, energy security. It's about saving consumers money. It's about product getting into the market. But in the near term, we've seen some very promising trends. A whole bunch of technologies that have been funded by RPE are now companies. Just to give you a flavor, the kind of innovation that's being funded here, Makani Power is a company that's funded by RPE that's basically think of it as a fixed wing, almost kite-based wind turbine that harnesses wind power at high altitude. No one believed this would work, but RPE has shown it works. The same with drilling for geothermal. We have enough geothermal power underneath us in our country to power the whole country, but we can't get to it because we can't drill to it. And RPE has funded a technology that uses laser-based energy to drill through the hardest rock known to man, and you know what? It works. And so we're seeing some technologies that are doing exactly what you want RPE to do, but then early metrics are looking really good. I actually think this year will be a crossover point where if you look at the cumulative amount of investment that's gone into RPE innovation since its beginning in 2009, it'll be about $1 billion as of this year. And I think at the same year, I'm expecting that the total amount of follow-on private capital that will have gone into startups and companies that have come out of RPE's innovation will exceed $1 billion. So it'll be the first time that the follow-on funding has exceeded the investment into the organization, but that's just the beginning. And so I think that you'll start to see that divergence where these technologies start getting into the market and that the return on investment kind of metrics are going to start being huge for RPE.
Terrific. So let's transition now to EERE. You went from RPE in a startup company to essentially be the CEO of a larger company. And at that time, if you recall, Steve Chu and you and I had chats about this, is that, this will be great if you do it, but do you really want to do it? And you said, I want to do this. Tell us why.
Well, first, to close out on the RPE issue, I think what I learned from some of my mentors is that if you want to start a new government agency, one, it's got to actually work. It has to have a good substantive model, and I think that RPE is showing that that's true. But equally important is you have to have a good political model. There have to be people that care about what you're doing, and they need to support it in Washington, D.C. And so the substantive model was clear before Arun got in. That was nascent. Arun really, solidified and created the RPE model with the team, but we had nothing on that other side. And so there are stories, and Arun is famous, that he would actually just walk around on Capitol Hill and walk into doors and knock on congressmen and senators' office and say, hey, we're doing this amazing new thing, let me tell you about it. And no one in Washington, D.C. does that. And so I think Arun is owed a great debt of gratitude for actually knowing how to go and get this agency formed. A brilliant scientist and a politician. It's rare to have those both in one human being. And one thing I would encourage anyone in the audience to do is to come and serve in the government for some period of time, because when you look at it from the outside, it's so hard to understand anything that's going on, and it's easy to be skeptical. But I think when you get in, you understand a lot better. And some of the things, I actually have become very much more optimistic about the impact and the role of government, while also understanding some of its limitations. And if there's one observation I've had that kind of defines some of the limitations or challenges with government is it's a setup that is intrinsically risk averse. That you're very visible, you're under the microscope. Americans are rightly skeptical of their government. They want to make sure it's doing the right things. And so what's really interesting, that I think that was a challenge that the Department of Energy had, that RPE was really has done a huge job in really changing the innovation model and the culture of the department. And at RPE, it's really interesting, right, that you bring these really brilliant folks in and you basically say, hey, you have $30 to $60 million, go change the world, as long as you can convince the other 20 really smart folks at RPE that it's a good idea to do. But also, on your badge, it says, when you go in, you look and you say, it says that you leave three years later, you're out. And so by the time that you've had the experience to become risk averse, you get kicked out. So I think that's a really important element of the RPE model. But what was great about RPE is you're able to start from scratch. And you could build the right kind of agency that was user-friendly, high impact, could recruit and retain the right talent, would manage projects very actively, be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And what was great is a lot of that was portable into the main line, you know, the heart of the beast within Department of Energy. And so we've been able to take a lot of the lessons learned from RPE, you know, from active project management, you know, giving really aggressive milestones and managing them, and if projects fail, moving the money somewhere else very quickly. You know, being willing to take more technology risk, you know, bringing in very high talent people. And so, as I discussed before, the talent thing is a big deal. And so I think that we've seen RPE as kind of the tip of the spear in terms of changing the whole culture at the Department of Energy to be a much, you know, Department of Energy has a great track record in terms of, you know, improving batteries, making solar power cheap, and combustion engines more efficient. But I think that we knew we could take it to the next level, and I think over the last few years we have, and I think RPE was really the nexus of that.
So let's go outside the Department of Energy. Department of Energy has enabled a lot of funding for research, et cetera, but let's step back from that. And we just had a meeting in Paris. I think there is consensus that that the world is going to decarbonize. I think the private sector is sort of moved on, and so let's do something about it. And here we are in a North American forum, United States, Canada, and Mexico. Tell us what you think from your vantage point and being in the private sector first, then in being for 7, almost 8 years in the government. What should North America do that'll make it the icon of the world of how to do it? Because I think people are looking for models of excellence. Give us your view.
Yeah, at the very highest level, you know, I think a mega theme through the lens through which I see a lot of this, and I think Secretary Moniz has really clarified as well, is that, you know, continued aggressive technology innovation that would enable cost reduction has a symbiotic effect on ambitious policy. And so that if you can push innovation and cost reduction, it enables you to push the envelope on policy and have that policy actually be credible and cost effective, but then that allows for growth in the volume of the technology and cost reduction. So there's a nice symbiotic relationship there. And so, you know, when I look at where we are, we've made so much progress since the beginning of this administration, whether it's the 60% reduction in our oil imports because of the shale boom, or it's the 3.5x increase in wind power production with the 40% cost reduction, similar things in solar and wind and batteries. But there's also been a lot of progress on the policy front, but after a failed attempt to get really kind of an economy-wide cap and trade regime in at the beginning of the administration with the Congress, the president has really had to use his administrative authority to push things forward. And so if you look at each sector, there are profound policies that have been put in place that are going to have a huge impact, whether it's CAFE standards, the fuel economy standards for vehicles, where for 25 years we were flat at 20 miles per gallon. That's going to go up to 50 by 2025, doubling. First heavy-duty fuel economy standards ever. If you look at the power sector, we have our Clean Power Plan that is put in place and will be implemented in the next administration. Tax credits have actually been a great success story for wind and solar. Just got extended. There was a reasonable compromise in the Congress to allow that to happen. And then if you look at the stationary sector, buildings, you know, we've made a lot of progress with appliance standards that Mike McQuaid, efficiency standard Mike McQuaid talked about. But I think there's a growing consensus that this isn't the most efficient way to do this, and that going to the next administration, the United States and North America wide, we really need to set an economy-wide price on carbon. It's going to be a much more efficient way of doing business. And so I think there's a lot of momentum in that direction. Exactly how you do that, I think, is an important question, but that's going to be a really important thing going forward. And there's been a lot of great discussion on this, but the grid is really, I think, the other place where we need to invent new ways of working together, new institutions, in order to be able to tackle the opportunity we have before us to really have a resilient, reliable, affordable grid that achieves our goals of greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And so I think we're going to have to create completely new institutions that allow for the right kind of collaboration between the states who have most of the authority, the federal government that has opportunities and resources for assistance, universities who are doing amazing work. So I think if there are two areas that I think we really need to focus on, I think is getting that price on carbon, which will drive a lot of the right activity, and then figuring out a way to restructure our electricity sector so we can get the future grid that our nation deserves.
Terrific. So before I go to the next question, if there are questions from the audience, if someone wants to hand me, that'll be great. But let me ask you, so you've been there for 7 years now, and going on the 8th now. I think amongst the team that went out there when President Obama took over as the president and Secretary Chu was there, I think you've been there the longest.
Yep.
You've looked at the beast from the inside. We will have a new team out there starting sometime next year, around about this time. What would you tell them from the lessons learned of 7 or 8 years of this term? What went well? What did not go so well?
Yeah, that's a great point, Arun. And there, I mentioned there's been this quiet revolution within the Department of Energy, one that's not very widely reported on, but I think in the long run will have a very large impact on the productivity and the impact of the department. I'd say the first thing I would point out is what I mentioned before, is the importance of having a leadership team, especially the secretary, who is a well-regarded energy innovation leader, someone who really understands energy policy, energy markets, but also really understands energy innovation. The Department of Energy is, some estimates would say we're 50% of the world's government-funded R&D, so we got to get that right. And so I think that's really important. Historically, another big area is that the Department of Energy and any federal bureaucracy, you find these silos of excellence that don't often break down between each other when they really need to. And under this administration, I think starting with Secretary Chu and under your leadership when you're acting undersecretary, and then going through with Secretary Moniz, we've created these important cross-cutting initiatives that really break down those silos. So the Sunshot Initiative, which laid out a bold goal of cost competitiveness of solar by 2020, was a cross-department initiative. The same with EV Everywhere, where we have a similar goal for EVs in 2022. And the same with the grid modernization initiatives. Especially as we move the widgets, the technologies become more and more cost effective, and the challenges become more system level challenges. Organizing ourselves in innovative ways around systems and across boundaries is important. And then finally, some of you may know or may not know about the DOE's National Laboratory System. This is a very large enterprise, one of the world's largest research enterprises in the world. And we've gotten some great results from it, but we're almost certain we can get a lot more. And I think before this administration, there was a little sense that the department was a little bit ambivalent in its relationship with those labs. And under this administration, we've really changed that, and we've worked with our national labs as partners. And in the past, there was a little bit of a sense we were micromanaging too much. And now we've gotten to a point where it's more of a partnership, where we're giving them empowerment, but we're holding them accountable to bold goals. And we're also, there's historically been a little bit of an ivory tower in some of these major research institutions. And as it relates to trying to get clean energy technologies, we want to have a commercially aware culture that really understands commercialization and thinks of it as something that's exciting to do, doesn't make them do bad science. So we've done a lot of efforts to really kind of revamp our commercialization culture, whether it's something called LabCorp, where we do a 2-month boot camp with our national lab researchers, where they have to call 50 customers to figure out what the technology that they are developing could do, or whether it's Cyclotron Road at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where we're spinning in world-class PhDs and postdocs from Stanford and other schools who want to do startups but can't find that venture capital today. And so I think those are some areas that I think that we need the new administration to continue. We've gotten part of the way there, but we need a new administration to take us over the hump.
So we have 1 minute left, and I'm going to put you on the spot now. 10 years from now, looking back for these 8 years that you would have spent, which is a very important part of your life, was there an event that kept you awake at night, really excited? And was there an event that kept you awake at night, pulling your hair with anxiety?
Well, I think the scariest moment was when, when we got $400 million for RPE in the Recovery Act. An interesting fact, it was the only new agency formed during the Recovery Act. We had done all this work, and we had been behind closed doors, and Arun wasn't there yet, and everyone in the media was saying we were going to fail. And so the biggest moment for me is we reviewed 4,000 applications. There were 3 of us. We had basically slept 6 hours a night, 7 days a week for 8 months. And then we made these final selections, and then we put them out, and we wondered what was going to happen. And then and we were worried we might have just killed this new agency, or maybe we did something good. And then ended up being a rousing agreement that it was exactly what an ARPA-like entity should do.
It was both excitement and...
Yeah, I think that one probably covers both of them. So,
Great.
yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
On that high note, thank you very much for your service. Thank you for coming here. And I really look forward to your future years.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you.
Arun.
Okay.